lived in homes that had damp. I was in social housing. I lived in a home that had damp that was affecting my child's health. We've got NHS workers right now, as we're having this interview, that are actually queuing to go to food banks. And I know you were saying in your exchange policy statement that we're going to have the most dangerous and hard and transitional period in the next 2 years. But I feel like the question should be not what are you going to do, but when are you going to do something to make a change? People are suffering right now. What are you going to do and when are you going to do it?
So, on social media, Judy, on social media, we are making that change already. So we passed a law called the Online Safety Act.
This is Rishi Sunak. He's on Loose Women, and he's experiencing a car crash of an interview when he's asked about what he's doing about poverty, and particularly child poverty, in the UK. On this particular occasion, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He does reference the fact that he was talking about social media earlier, and so he's trying to answer that question. But see what he says about child poverty and poverty in general as we go on.
I think
last
he was
year.
talking about poverty there, really.
Yeah, but I was just going to start with all the things that you talked about, and I think that's really...
it's important for you to get into the juice of it. We've heard so many things, and the concerns, as a mum here, sitting with you with a 14-year and an 18-year, and many other that are watching, what is happening now?
So
we are losing
right now,
kids to poverty in UK.
So let's do all this. So on social media right now, what is happening?
Is he ever going to get to the bottom of answering that question, how to deal with poverty, or is he just going to continually talk about social media? That's not the question she's asking.
Is that the regulator, Ofcom, is going through and specifying exactly what is permissible and not permissible.
I mean, that's
online.
a big subject, online safety, but it's already being watered down by the tech companies from what it was originally.
That's not right. And actually, the regulator, what the bill does, the law does, is give the regulator the power to fine these big tech companies an enormous amount if they don't comply with the new rules that are published. So making sure that kids aren't exposed to harmful content.
Okay, social media out the way. Is he now going to go and start talking about poverty and how he's going to tackle it?
So what about
eating
those children
disorders.
who are not exposed to it because they don't even have the means for gas and electric in their homes? What are we doing to helping those parents that are suffering and helping the people that are trying to help us at the front line, that are looking to you for a safe line? Yeah. We've got people that are going to work and they are not eating because we're in a state of poverty. What is going to take place now? What are you going to do now to address this?
Now, you would hope with a capable politician with a plan that they'd list 3 or 4 different things. For example, you might say, right, we're so concerned about poverty, we're making sure that there are free school meals, like Sadiq Khan. However, he starts talking about how hard he's had it and the country's had it.
So financial security is something I was talking about on Monday, and that's saying it's probably the most acute concern that people have is their financial security. And look, we've been through a really tough time, you know that, right? You've been talking about it on your show for the last few years, a pandemic, a war in Ukraine, energy bills.
No mention of the self-harm inflicted by Brexit, which he was part of.
For anybody, Judy. So what we've done during that time is continually provide support to people, and you saw that. You saw that with me during the pandemic and furlough, right? There were millions of people who thought they were going to lose their jobs, and we stepped in to provide that support.
And we're 3 minutes in, and it comes back to this glorious heckle. Instead of Rishi answering that question, he started talking about essentially how hard the country's had it, and therefore how hard he's had it as Chancellor. He even made out that it was almost as bad for him as it was for everyone else.
None of this has been easy for anybody.
Does anyone else feel that there's this element of him wanting to get sympathy from the crowd of how hard he's had it as Chancellor? I bet he hasn't had to go without a meal. So to give a bit more context, this is the level of poverty that the UK is going through right now.
2 main ways the government measures child poverty. We're using the measure preferred by most charities, relative poverty. That means families who live on 60% or less of the average income. And these official figures show us that 3 in 10 children in the UK live in poverty. That's 4.3 million children in poverty in the UK.
We have to save some electric and gas for the hot water bottles.
We'll just sleep with our coats on.
We try not to eat a lot in one day. Even though most of us are really hungry, we have to be careful with our food. My mum finds this weird, but we've never been on holiday. Oh, yeah. Doesn't matter if you go on holiday or not, you can still be a great person. I've never been on an airplane because my mum's not rich enough to. She spends it all on rent and everything else, and I don't care as long as she's trying her best. I love her as much as I do.
So is this situation getting better or worse? Well, that 4.3 million children in relative poverty, there it is, that is up from 3.6 million children a decade ago.
That's the level of poverty that the UK is going through right now, and it doesn't seem that he's got any plan to resolve it. But let's go back to what he said about furlough.
You saw that with me during the pandemic and furlough, right?
Yes, we did. We also remember that you left 3 million people out on the lurch because they paid themselves in dividends or their companies hadn't taken up the furlough scheme. LBC's Nick Ferrari pulled him up on this in an interview a few months after the initial furlough scheme had begun. Have a listen and watch for his reaction when he's told that 8 people have taken their lives down to his scheme.
Chancellor, the so-called 3 million excluded, or those that have been left behind and have not benefited from any of your initiatives, were again left out. Earlier in the show, I spoke with Annika Hicks, who's founder of Excluded UK. She was quite distressed. I just want to play you a little of what she told me.
Do you know, every time there's an announcement, the volunteer team and myself are inundated with people who don't see any other way out. We even last night we were on red alert, really. We've lost 7 or 8 members of the community within the last 4 weeks. It's just not fair.
Chancellor, that's 7 or 8 people who've taken their lives in the last 4 weeks. They've had no help since March. They had no help yesterday. Why, and when will this change?
Well, Nick, obviously it's very sad to hear, and I also don't know the individual circumstances.
No, I know.
I've seen more emotional empathy from a Terminator.
We did the same with energy bills. Around half of a typical family's energy bill.
We've got 4 million children living in poverty,
made sure we were covered. And then more recently...
3 times he's been directly asked, and now he's being given a direct hint. 4 million in poverty. What are you going to do?
You know, what we've done is made sure that our welfare system is working, benefits are being uprated for those people who are in work.
For those that are in work. That's what he just said. The mask ever so slightly slipped. It's their theory, their ideology. In order to get benefits, you have to be doing some sort of job, no matter your circumstance.
That you talked about, we've delivered a big tax cut which will put more money in their bank accounts every month.
How do you connect with these people? A lot of people are concerned that you cannot emotionally connect to them because you haven't and don't live the life that they have lived.
It might also have something to do with this comment he made as a teenager.
I have friends who are aristocrats, I have friends who are upper class, I have friends who are working class, but not working class.
So how do you connect with people when they're saying to you that they're worried to send their child to the local shop because of knife crime, when they're worried to sleep in their home because of damp, when they're worried to go to work or take a day off sick, even though they're suffering with mental health because they don't want to miss that paycheck? How do you connect with people like this when they need you to protect them as their Prime Minister?
So I'd point you to what happened in the pandemic.
Where he left 3 million to fend for themselves, to starve and even commit suicide, and seems to have zero empathy towards any of those that died.
Right, so pandemic happened, right? I had this new job as Chancellor. Most people didn't know who I was. Now, at that moment, all the things that you just said, Judy, were true then.
So he's had several years now in which to fix those problems, and he's just bragged that those problems were there then and they're still here now. And they're not going away. In fact, they're getting worse as the years go by.
Right, and I wasn't going to lose my job.
Wow, what is the context of that? When asked about poverty, he starts talking about how he's not going to lose his job. That means he's got job security, which other people didn't have during the pandemic. And they still don't have today.
It's not as if the pandemic restrictions were going to mean that every MP was fired or every minister was fired and lose their job and shut down.
This is such a car crash. I don't quite get what he's trying to put across here. He seems to be bragging that MPs have got job security. What is he trying to say? That because all MPs didn't have job security, that they're all culpable as he is? Is he pointing his finger at other people when he's the one who's been Chancellor and Prime Minister wielding all the power? What is this? How is this person leader of the UK?
Same thing happened with energy bills. That's what we did.
He's just bragged about a problem that's been created by a Conservative government. The privatisation of the energy sector meant that our prices went up through the roof when COVID and Ukraine happened by 215%. I don't know what to make of this. it's just bamboozling that you've got someone who's just blurting out all the bad things that he's meant to be keeping quiet and saying that they're greatness. I honestly cannot say whether or not this is some form of gaslighting that he's done to the people and to loose women, or if it's just sheer stupidity. But this is one of the worst interviews he's ever done, and it gets worse as it goes along. And by the end of this, we've now seen that he doesn't have a plan for dealing with child poverty, other than for people to get into work.
I think I'd ask people to judge me by my actions.
And these are his actions.
3 in 10 children in the UK live in poverty. That's 4.3 million children in poverty in the UK. 2 in 10 children live in deep poverty. That's where their families live on just half the average income.
Once again, let me know your thoughts. Was this one of the worst interviews you've ever seen by any Prime Minister? It's got to be up there. And if you've got this far, well, you should be clicking the like and subscribe button. I must have done something to keep your attention all the way through. Once again, thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.